My name is Arin Lindauer, and you're listening to A Life Without Struggle. I'm a wife, a mother of 2 wonderful children, a 2-time best-selling author, and a highly driven and successful entrepreneur. In my 17-plus year career as a mindset and health expert, I know what holds women back from a life you only dream about. Whether you're a CEO, a businesswoman, or executive, I started this podcast because I have been where you are, and I know you want and deserve more out of your life. I believe women are limitless. We just get lost along the way. The process to get you there is the topic and purpose of this podcast. When you understand what you want, you can truly step into a life without struggle. Welcome, and I'm so thankful you're here. Welcome back to another episode of Life Without Struggle. My name is Arin Lindauer, and today we're going to dig into a topic around taking the emotion out of food. Okay, so this is a big topic. This is a big topic that is something that even myself, I've definitely had to create a new relationship with food and just better understanding. And I want to bring this podcast to you here today to help not only help you be mindful, but help you understand the science behind why we get so attached to food, some of the neurological aspects to why we get so emotional about food. And I really want to leave you with this empowerment that you are ultimately the one in control. The problem is we feel out of control. We've got deep programs. We've got coping mechanisms. And so today I want to shed some light on, hey, food is food. Food is fuel. I will never forget, one of the not very first times, but early on in my dating years with Tony, my now husband, he was like, food is fuel. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. And it was just so funny because I remember opening up his fridge, and this is, so long ago when we first started dating, and I opened up his fridge and it was literally chicken breast, broccoli, and then his freezer, he had fake Folgers in there for his coffee. And it was just so funny because I was like, oh my God, this guy didn't have any money. When in reality, he did. He did very well in his early years of training and was, a very, very popular trainer at the gym that we were at. But I always just laughed because he's like, this is the fuel I need. And I'm like, yeah, I want some spaghetti over here. So anyways, let's dive into this because so many times we get caught up in our feelings and our emotions, and we seek for some kind of comfort or emotion and coping mechanism. And a lot of times we tend to go to food, we'll go to alcohol, and this is something that can just hinder any kind of weight loss, let alone just being a healthy individual, not only from a healthy weight and body composition, but then just healthy in your mind. And the reason I want to bring the mind into this is because that's actually what you have to conquer. That is what you actually have to better understand, is what is actually happening inside of your brain that keeps you going back for another sugary treat, that keeps you going back for another salty crunch, that makes you want more and more and more. Now, here's the thing that I will speak into is in some of the quote unquote more unhealthy type of foods, your chips, your candies, things like that, there are substances in those foods that are known to be addictive. Okay, so this is where, I can completely go conspiracy theory, which it actually isn't, but I can completely go in this full circle behind government, the food industry. You could throw big pharma in there, and everybody's just kind of feeding each other. And this is something that, especially as Americans, we have to wake up to. There are things in our food that other countries don't even allow. So it's extremely important for us to understand what is actually in our food, what are we actually addicted to, Because this is, eons ago, General Mills knew how terrible cereal was for the average American. And there's very closed door conversations that have been made more public, but they knew how addictive and how terrible their cereals were for people. And absolutely one of the worst ways that you can start your day is by having cereal. And they knew that this could cause problems from overconsumption, but they did nothing about it. And instead, they looked the other way and they kept producing your sugary cereals. Now, here's a very interesting one. Think about good old Cheerios. So, and I literally just had this the other day. Cheerios has amazing marketing. So they talk about how it lowers cholesterol. And you kind of just look at that and say, how? Like, how does a bowl of carbohydrates and added sugar lower one's cholesterol? Okay. So when you can objectively step back and say, what on earth are they claiming? You can start to see the loopholes. You can start to see the circle that everybody's dancing in. And this is why it's so important that you educate yourself with good information that isn't conspiracy theory, but isn't falling for the marketing, isn't falling for whatever narrative, or you have to follow the money, okay? You have to understand this. And this is where we truly, when we think about our food, we want our food to be in its natural state as much as possible. You want to think about if anything can be in a box, in a bag, if it has a shelf life, there is a reason. There are things that are put in there. And even I've had to check myself on different products that I was like, oh yeah, this is a better product. And even myself, I've gotten duped in some of the marketing or the packaging. And I was like, oh man, this really isn't that much better for you. Got it. So you got to constantly question things and you got to dig in. And if you can't name all the ingredients on the back of a label, like you really need to question, what is this stuff? How is it interacting in my body? And especially from a hormonal standpoint, there are so many things that all of us have been exposed to that we just had no idea. Anybody heat up any microwave dinners? TV dinners is what we called them back in the day. I mean, that was like the greatest thing ever. I remember when my mom would buy me, what was it, like kids cuisine or something like that, and it come in this blue box, and it was really cool, and you had a little dessert that went with it, and it was just like a treat. I was so excited to have one of those as a kid, and I look at it now, and I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. Now, granted, TV dinners have come a long way. They're definitely using a lot better products. People are more aware, but just think about it. Heating up that plastic in your good old microwave, can't help but think there might be a little something there that we probably shouldn't be exposed to, and we certainly shouldn't be exposed to on a daily basis. So you kind of have to pick your battles when it comes to food, but we have to understand, what is our food really for? The food is for you to fuel your body. And I have a lot of folks tell me, oh, Arin, we're such foodies. And that is great to an extent. But here's the deal. Just because you're a self-proclaimed foodie and you like to eat, yummy foods, and yummy is in the eye of the beholder. But just because you're a foodie doesn't make you healthy. And I've found more times than not that the person is actually very unhealthy because they have no idea how many calories, how much oil, butter, salt, fat, everything that's in the quote unquote foodie food, because it's just so rich, it's so yummy, it's so decadent. And so it's just become a very, very, very interesting space. So that's where I wanted to dig into this topic around taking our emotions out of our food and truly using food for what it was meant to be. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy some good old birthday cake. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy your favorite dinner. I'll tell you guys, I absolutely love a good steak, potato, and green bean. And I'm talking like going to a restaurant and experiencing all the fanfare. And I love every aspect about that kind of meal. And I think about that meal and I'm like, man, this is like, it's pretty close to its given state. Yes, there's butters and sauces and things that get mixed in there, but it's such a solid meal. So we want to think about, how are we perceiving our food? Is the food comfort? This is where, if you're calling food your comfort, to ask some questions. I'm going to teach a concept called resolution formula. And this has been something that's been very, very helpful for me in understanding my emotions around an array of topics. I've processed stuff when it comes to, my mother in particular, and just instead of feeling so much anger about, her lack of health, I can just have compassion and love, because that's truly what's going to serve me. The same when it comes for food is, instead of feeling like, I needed food as a coping mechanism. And instead of feeling that, I had to ask myself, what is the purpose of this coping mechanism? And so I had to truly name what was the emotion that I was feeling in these moments. And so this is something that I highly recommend if you find yourself in emotional states, whether it be sadness, anger, frustration, just I've had a terrible, no good, very bad day. I mean, think about every time all of a sudden you're like, screw it mentality. That's what I want you to lean into. Okay, what is this emotion that I'm feeling? I want you to stop yourself dead in your tracks, and I want you to ask, what emotion am I feeling? So you literally name this emotion. I have sadness, let's just say, for example. What is the purpose of being sad? Okay. And so we can start working through, and this may take you a few stabs at what is the purpose. And so, like, I have had to work through multiple layers on why I would go after this or that. And instead of just staying true to the plan, right? Because, okay, we all, reasonably speaking, want to eat well. We want to have certain results with our body. We desire some form of weight loss, fat loss is what we're after. And so we know we, reasonably speaking, have to eat a certain way. But what happens when our emotions get the best of us? Well, we reach for something semi-healthy. I mean, give us a little bit here. Then once we go for that semi-healthy thing, then we go for the thing that's not so healthy, and then just all hell breaks loose, right? Anybody go in the pantry and like find something somewhat good, and then all of a sudden it turns into 50 bad things? That's very, very, very common. So we have to understand, what is the emotion that I'm actually feeling, and what is the purpose of feeling that emotion? You can be sad and still eat well. You can grieve and still take care of your body. You can be mad at the world and still eat well. Okay? Be mad at your partner and still take care of your body. You can be tired upon tired upon tired and still eat well. Don't need to have some dichotomy of, just because my day went to hell in a handbasket, that I have to consume stuff that is quote unquote going to make me feel better. Because you and I both know, especially if you're on a health and wellness journey, it's not going to make you feel better. Okay. It's actually going to make you feel worse. And then you're going to insert guilt and shame and frustration. And then we have this rhetorical loop of self-sabotaging behavior, because these are programs that run deep in us. So I'm going to go there for a second, because some of this stuff you are unaware. We're unaware that there's a program deep inside of you. There's a program that you saw modeled from a very young age. You saw that when someone else was in your family was sad, that went and got a sugary treat, or every time you got a good grade, they got you ice cream. Or every time you were celebrating, got some sort of food item. Okay. So we quickly make these associations. A very, very interesting one was my son came home from school. This was actually last year. And he said, "How come I never get dessert?" And I was like, "What's he talking about? I go at home? What do you mean?" And he was like, "No, I never have dessert in my lunch." And I'm like, "Oh, the lunch that I pack you every day?" He goes, "Yeah, you never put a dessert. I never have a candy. I never have a treat. There's nothing in there that's a dessert. My friends want to know where my dessert is." And I was like, "Whoa." I go, Wait a minute. So your friends have dessert?" He was like, "Yeah, almost everybody at my table has a dessert in their lunch." And I was like, blown away first off, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, bud." And I started asking him, I was like, "Well, what is it?" Because I was trying to like figure out, was it like fruit? And he didn't realize, or, what was it? And he was like, "Well, no, they have like Reese cups or Oreos," or, he starts naming off all this junk food. And I was like, "Hey, bud, I'm really sorry, but we don't eat that. And we certainly don't eat that at lunch. And we're not going to eat that at school every single day." And oh boy, you should have seen the waterworks. All right. So it was a good lesson though, because I said to him, but then I'll share with you guys where this conversation went, because, it kind of backfired on me a little bit. But he goes, "Well, so are my friends unhealthy?" And I was like, "Oh, dang, here we go." But I had to explain to him, I said, "Hey, some people feel that this is okay to have something on a daily basis." And I said, "I understand how many grams of sugar that your body should have on a daily basis." And I said, "I monitor this pretty heavily because it can be a slippery slope. The second you have one treat, then you want another treat, then you want another treat. And this is something that can start very, very young." So we have definitely not been in the camp of like not letting our kids have sugar or have candy. But I was very hard nosed when they were younger. And it was just even interesting. We used breast milk for their first year plus of their life. And then we used whole milk after that. And even I was challenged with whole milk because I was like, there's sugar. There's sugar in this, added sugar. And so we quickly weaned them off. And what's so interesting now is they beg to have a glass of milk. And I'm like, it's just sugar, right? Like, so it's just, and we all grew up in the milk does a body good, and we all consumed milk, and it really doesn't. And if anything, in coaching clients, I have found that more people do better with less dairy in their system. So that's like a whole nother topic to go on. But the association that he was missing out, or why didn't he have something because everybody else had it, was a very, very interesting space to navigate as a parent. And then when I said it wasn't healthy, then he wanted to know why his friends weren't healthy. And I was like, oh man, I am like paddling upstream right now. And I just shared with him, we all have differences in opinions when it comes to how we should eat and what we should do. And I said, this is what we believe as a family, and this is what we're doing. And as soon as I got to that point of the conversation, he was pretty much done with me. But it was a very challenging conversation because the last thing I want to do is say, oh, all your friends are eating junk. But on the other hand, I didn't want to teach that that was okay behavior. And even I've been very, very challenged with the school system as to how much candies and goodies and holidays. And it's just the sugar is rampant. So full circle, this is deep programming. We introduced refined added sugar very, very young into little bodies that don't know any better. And it excites their brain and they love it. Okay. They just love it and they want more. If you've ever watched a kid, oh my gosh, they just want more. They want more. They want more. And the second you tell them no, now you've got a crying kid. And guess what's easier as a parent? It's easier to give in than it is to stand your ground. So it's important to understand that a lot of this stuff that you experience as adult was stuff that you were exposed to from a very, very young age. And what's really cool about our amazing brains is we can rewrite anything. We can rewrite any associations. We can even, if you loved a certain product, let's just say, if you loved ice cream, I have a technique that I can absolutely make ice cream like make you want to vomit. Now, I don't pull out that technique very often because I think it's kind of mean, but there is a technique to completely disassociate with yummy and actually make it probably the most disgusting thing you could ever think of. I watched this in one of our mental programming trainings, and this lady, she really wanted to get rid of Diet Coke. And she was like, oh my gosh, I would give anything to get rid of Diet Coke. And the instructor, he was like, anything? And he was like, be careful before we go down this journey, because you will never look at a Diet Coke the same way again. And she goes, great, that would be awesome. And by the time he was done with this whole technique, it's called don't like, he completely disassociated her love to Diet Coke. And to this day, from my knowledge, she has not had a Diet Coke since. But I always say cautiously, because I'm a huge believer in balance, to ever have someone do this technique on you. So it's important for us to understand that when we feel an emotion towards food, there's something that we need to learn. We have to dig a little bit deeper and understand, why am I doing this? There's an interesting part of coaching clients in weight loss. And when someone feels really like, I'm having to restrict, I can't have any of the foods I like. And so there does come a line in the sand where we do have to reasonably educate ourselves and say, hey girl, the food you were eating was not serving your body. And it's not gonna promote a healthy lifestyle. Now, again, this doesn't mean you have to eat lettuce and carrots, but on the flip side, we have to make sure that we're genuinely fueling our body with what our body needs. So an important thing to always dig into is understanding, okay, how many calories do I actually burn in a day? So something, for example, that is really, really helpful is wearing some sort of tracking device that is going to give you, reasonably speaking, how many calories you burned in a day based on your activity and what's called your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. So it's just the rate that your body burns, just you existing, meaning you didn't get out of bed. Like, this is just what it takes for your body to function. And then what the tracking devices do is it then helps us better understand your activity level. And so when we know, reasonably speaking, how many calories you burn in a day, then we can step back and say, okay, here's how many calories you need to consume. And what we want to think about is putting yourself in a 500 calorie deficit, so that if we did that day after day after day, and 7 days would go by, that you were always in a 500 calorie deficit, you will lose a pound of fat every single week. So that is what can be helpful when you understand, okay, I need to consume 1,500 calories in my day. And if you were to look at what 1,500 calories of really good food looks like, you're going to be surprised at how much food you can actually eat. If you had, some eggs and a piece of toast for breakfast, or maybe you had a protein shake with some, almond milk or coconut milk and a little bit of frozen fruit in there, that's a really great breakfast. Then let's say you get to lunch. Maybe you have a really nice salad. It's got a lot of good veggies and a vinaigrette, and you put some chicken breast on there. Maybe some hard-boiled eggs are cut up on there. That right there is a very, very satisfying, lots of crunch, lots of texture. And then let's say you get to dinner and you have chicken or pork chop or a steak, and you put yourself a nice green vegetable on there, and then you put yourself a sweet potato or a baked potato, or, reasonably speaking, in a cupped hand. So that's about a half a cup of a serving. And you kind of step back and you go, dang, that was a lot of really yummy food. That's really good food. And reasonably speaking, depending on those portions, you're probably going to have about 200 calories left over. So maybe at the end of the night, you're like, hey, I'm still a little bit hungry. You had a pretty active day. And you maybe have a small serving of Greek yogurt, some fresh berries, drizzle a little honey on there if you want to take the tang out of the Greek yogurt. And I mean, that's a very, very satisfying day. And for most women that I talk to, they love that. That's what they crave and enjoy. They enjoy eating good food like that. So what happens? It's all the associations. It's all the programming we have. So many times, like, I think about when someone tells me they want, like Doritos or cookies or, that it's multiple sweets day after day after day. Here's the thing. If it was like once a week, you had a nice homemade chocolate chip cookie, like who cares? I'm going to look the other way, even in a weight loss, because if the rest of the days and food was on point, like, dude, you're totally fine. Like, you don't have to do this perfectly. And honestly, if we were adding up all the calories, you probably did have a little bit of wiggle room. As long as that doesn't open a can of worms that, now it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 4, and we're eating the whole batch, that's when we're going to get ourselves into problems. So that is your secret sauce. And what I want to leave you with and wrap up this podcast with is you are in more control of your food than you realize, okay? So think about this. If you have to have the Dorito, if you have to have the alcoholic beverage, if you have to have fill in the blank, you got to really check yourself and ask yourself the question, who's in control? For most of us, we're going to be like, oh, no, man, no, that thing ain't winning. No way. For most women that I know, that I coach, that I speak to on a daily basis, we don't want somebody else controlling us. We want to be in control. And this is where I want to empower you, that you get to objectively step back and look at your life and say, am I doing things that are serving me and helping me get closer to my goals? Or am I doing things that are making me get further and further away from my goals? So you have to really check yourself in these moments and ask yourself, am I letting this emotion take over me? And that's what's actually controlling this food. The food is controlling me. Emotions are controlling me. Because this was a very, very interesting concept. It took me a little bit to really latch on to this, but our emotions are our emotions. We create them. No one tells you you're happy. No one tells you you're sad. No one tells you you're angry. Those are things that you feel as a response to something. So I want you to objectively think next time you're feeling emotions. And this isn't that I don't want you to feel happy or I don't want you to feel sad. Like, I think it's healthy to have these emotions. But we have to understand if they're triggering emotions that are causing you to do things that are not going to allow you to hit your goals. It's no different in business when we're looking at whether we're on track to hit targets. And if you're feeling off track, are we doing all the things that are going to get us towards the goal that we desire? Same with a weight loss goal is you have to ask yourself, are all the things that I'm doing helping me towards my goal or away from my goal? So a lot of times we have to really understand the deeper purpose behind what we feel on a daily basis. And I want you to be super empowered that you get to be in control of you and your emotions and what you eat. Yes, we maybe get in situations that aren't ideal. Maybe, so-and-so made their latest, greatest batch of whatever, and you politely, indulge because obviously it would just be super tough if you didn't. But it's also okay to say, oh my gosh, thank you. This is so great. I'm just going to have a bite because I've been working on my digestive system or whatever, right? You can honestly just say, hey, I've been working through some health stuff and I just don't want to upset my stomach right now. This is so amazing. And you can just move on, okay? That's where so many times we feel like we have to please people by eating certain things. And in reality, you just need to stand for what you believe in. I truly, truly believe that, especially with food, because man, food can get so weird. People push food, and that is a very, very interesting space of people like, here, have more. I never forget when my mom just like dumps more on my dad's plate. Eat. And it's like, oh God, that's really weird. So think about all of your emotions that you feel around food. And I want you one by one to dissect those. Ask, what is the purpose of this emotion? And you may have to ask that 5, 6, 7, 8 times till you actually get to the real purpose. When you get to the real purpose of that emotion around that food, you want to ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Because your logical brain is going to tell you the right answer. Your logical brain is going to be like, hey girl, like that's not going to serve you. You know, that's not a good food. You know that, just the second you have one, you're going to want 10 more. And so you want to ask yourself, what instead? For some of you, I know you're going to say, I just don't want to be tempted by things. Well, cool. Don't be tempted. And I know that's easy for me to say, but you're the one that's in control. And the second you say, well, it's so triggering or it's so tempting or Arin, you don't understand. Like, I do understand. And I need you to take the reins. I need you to take the reins and be in control of your body. This is your life. And I know that everything gets better when you take care of you and you're fully in control of that. Now, listen, it may be challenging one week versus the next week, and we may have to figure out a healthy nuance to your current schedule. You may have a lot of competing priorities. That's called life. Like everyone, I work with amazing women that are kicking buns and taking names all day long, and everybody's got their version of busy. And what one person thinks is like, oh my God, I'm slammed. The other person is like, dude, that'd be a walk in the park. So it's all our perception of our own reality. Okay. So again, really lean into yourself and ask yourself, how can I do this with ease? What would make my life easier? Because when we can remove the emotion around our food, we get to be in control. And a lot of times this is a deep, deep program, but the best part about every single program is you can rewrite it. Every neural pathway that's been shaped in this direction, we can rewrite. The brain has neuroplasticity, and we can rewrite things the way you want it. The problem is everybody just keeps showing up, keeps doing the same daggum thing, even if it doesn't serve them. So let's lean into this. Let's figure out what you personally need to do. And why not win? Why not win all day, every day, and stay in control over your emotions around? Go get them. Let me know how I can help.